All right, Larry Krueger here from the Pig and a Pickle Krug Show with a 49er video as we tape our final video before the 2025 draft with some last breaking news and notes from around the NFL and some last second thoughts on the 49ers before draft day is official later on today. We're just a couple hours away from the NFL draft. And of course, we're brought to you by Pig and a Pickle, the best barbecue in all of Northern California. Check them out. They're in Emeryville. They're in Corte Madera. They're open 7 days a week from 11 a.m. till 8 p.m. or until they run out. Pig and a Pickle, the best barbecue in all of Northern California. We're also brought to you by LearnKey Upskill Academy. LearnKey Upskill Academy is an online learning platform designed to get you job ready in 6 months or less, whether you're interested in IT, cybersecurity, marketing, or another high demand field. They offer over 30 certification programs to help you take that next step in your professional career. So we're big fans of them. The link is in the description below, and you can check them out at upskill.learnkey.com. And also thanks to our sponsor, Clawdaddy Arcades. Clawdaddy Arcades has got 3 locations in Southern Cal, plus locations in Fresno and Modesto. He's got a brand new Bay Area arcade coming soon. And he's a great follow on Instagram at claw_daddy_arcades to find a location near you. All right, it is draft day. And we've been waiting on this day for a long, long time. Who are the Niners going to pick at 11? What's the latest scuttle? What are we hearing? Okay, well, first of all, let's always check the odds. It's 2025. You always want to check the odds. Right now, the Niners are minus 140 to take a defensive lineman or an edge rusher. So it's most likely going to be a defensive lineman or an edge rusher. They're plus 175 to potentially take an offensive lineman. They're plus 350 to take a corner. So I would say look around at the defensive line and edge guys. According to the gamblers. According to the gamblers, Niners are going D-line, and they're going edge. So let's go through some of the things that we're hearing as we get closer to the draft kicking off from Green Bay, Wisconsin, Lambeau Field. The Patriots, according to sources, are really, really heavy favorites to go Will Campbell. Last year they went Drake May. They've got the 4th pick. They want to support their young quarterback. I think they're going to go Will Campbell at 4, according to reports. Now, the interesting thing on this, the top 4, I think, is probably going to go exactly how we would expect. Tennessee's going to go with Cam Ward. He's going to be their new franchise quarterback. Cleveland's going to go with Travis Hunter, a 2-way player who actually, believe it or not, they see more as a receiver than as a corner. I kind of see him more as a corner who I would put in a specialty package at receiver, but they like him at receiver. Abdul Carter is going to go 3 to the Giants. Why? Because the Giants are in New York, and if they pass on an all-time guy like Abdul Carter, they'll be known for it for forever. And Joe Shane and Brian Dable are on the hot seat already, so they got to go with the popular consensus. They don't have a chance to think outside the box or be creative in any way. I think if it was, if they were really after just saving their jobs, they might go Ashton Genty here, but they're going to go with the best player on the board, and that's Abdul Carter. So Abdul Carter goes 3 to the Giants. How does this affect the Niners? Well, Kayvon Thibodeau could very much be available via trade for a day 3 pick or a day 2 pick. And I would expect the Niners and John Lynch to probably make that phone call and explore that possibility. So I think Carter goes 3 to the Giants. I think Campbell goes 4 to the Patriots. So the top 4, I think, is real clear. But I don't think Jacksonville is going with Mason Graham at number 5. I think that's where this thing takes a turn. I think Jacksonville is going to try to support Trevor Lawrence with a run game. They tried to do it on draft day a couple of years ago when they went with the Clemson running back, and it just didn't work out. Now I think they're going to go with Genty. I think Genty goes to Jacksonville at 5. So that takes Genty away from the Raiders. So what do the Raiders do at 6? I think the Raiders could potentially trade back. And it's interesting. A lot of people think because it's Pete Carroll, they want to go for the quick fix. We know they're not going Tyler Warren. They have Bowers. They could go Mason Graham, but they also could go offensive line. And I would guess Armand Membu goes right there, 6 to the Raiders. That would be my guess. So, I think definitely Mason Graham does not go to Jacksonville at 5. And then you got to wonder, once this starts happening, when Graham and Membu are there, do the Niners call the Raiders at 6 and try to move up for either Membu or Graham, because the Raiders could probably be choosing between the two of them. So I think the Raiders go Membu at 6. I think the one little wrinkle that's coming up, if you look at the odds, Tyler Warren has been a shift in the odds, and there's a big shift that the Jets are going to take Tyler Warren at 7. So Abdul Carter, as far as the betting trends today, Abdul Carter has become a very, very strong favorite to be the Giants pick at number 3. Travis Hunter is an overwhelming favorite to go to the Browns at number 2. And we're seeing a lot of money and a lot of action on Tyler Warren going to the Jets at 7. So I think that's probably the way it comes out. So I think in whatever order, whether it goes Genti 5 and Membu 6, or if Genti falls to 6 and Jacksonville goes a different direction, I do think it's going to go Ward, Hunter, Carter, Campbell, Genti 5, Membu 6, Warren 7. Now, here's where things get really interesting. Carolina's looking to move out, and Dan Morgan said as much. Or do they take Jalon Walker? And Jalon Walker and Mikael Williams had a joint workout the other day where Jalon Walker just looked amazing. Absolutely amazing in that workout. I don't think anybody could have watched that workout and not been like, get me Jalon Walker. That's going to be interesting. This is where the draft, I think, gets really, really juicy. Carolina at 8, New Orleans at 9, and the Bears at 10. Of course, the Niners at 11. Now, according to the reports, Jackson Dart is now, according to the betting lines, I should say, Jackson Dart is now the betting favorite to be the second quarterback drafted. So I could see him definitely going 9 to the Saints. Jordan Schultz is gone on his soapbox about all the bemoaning all the negative talk about Shedeur Sanders and how he bothers him and this and that. Bottom line is there's some people that love Shedeur Sanders. I mean, Mel Kiper thinks he's Joe Montana 2.0. Other people think he's not any good and not worthy of being taken in day 1 of the draft. So I think Shedeur Sanders is the ultimate wild card. But this is where the action could happen as far as the quarterbacks. I think there's a good chance that the Saints go quarterback at 9. You're staring at, Milroe with a great arm and 4.3 speed, intriguing developmental prospect. Dart, who really looks the part, has a lot of the traits that you're looking for in a franchise quarterback as far as arm strength. He's got some great tape from Ole Miss, throwing to some really good receivers. He looks kind of pro ready. Of the guys at the top, he looks like he's ready to play. Shedeur, there's questions about his arm strength and his mobility and his overall skill set and his decision making and the consistency. But then there's also 74% completion percentage, and he's a super competitive kid. And if he's Deion's kid, he's probably really smart. Deion's one of the smartest football players in NFL history. So where does Jackson Dart go? Where does Shedeur go? Where does Milroe go? And I think, how eager are the Steelers to move up from 21? I think the teams right here in the mock at the back end of round 1, starting with Carolina and then the Saints and the Bears and the Niners, I think are going to get phone calls. I think they're going to get phone calls. And while those teams are looking to trade up, if Tyler Warren doesn't go 7 to the Jets, or even if he does, the Niners may get a call from the Colts at 14, who would love to go with Colston Loveland. But there's also thought that Denver may want to trade up for Colston Loveland. So you may see Chris Ballard, who just had a phone call the other day with John Lynch, obviously talking about something totally different, but I'm sure they could have talked about a number of things in one call. Could Chris Ballard and John Lynch, who have already done deals in the past, could they do another deal? I think if I'm the 49ers, the team that I would eye here is the Colts. If I could move from 11 to 14 and get a little bit more draft capital, I'd feel better about taking my guy there, whoever it is. Now, we'll talk about that for a second. It's an interesting, this is, the Niners need to draft a defensive lineman. And yet, here are the defensive linemen they've drafted since 2017. Solomon Thomas, DJ Jones, Kentavious Street, Julian Taylor, and Javon Kinlaw. Only DJ Jones is getting handsome. Well, I shouldn't say that. Kinlaw just got a big contract. I would say only DJ Jones is getting handsomely paid, but Kinlaw just got broken off. So Kinlaw, believe it or not, is getting paid. But DJ Jones has been the best. The rest of those guys have been just kind of streets in the league. Julian Taylor bounced out. Solomon Thomas is in the league as a backup. Kinlaw, as we said, I mean, he just got paid a lot of money, but he's not a terrific player. Who have the Niners gone with in the first round in the past? Well, 2017, they had two, right? Solomon Thomas, Reuben Foster. 2018, they took Michael McGlinchey. Foster, by the way, went 31st. Solomon Thomas went third. McGlinchey went 9th in 2018. Bosa was the second pick in 2019. Kinlaw went 14th in 2020. They came back with the 25th pick and took Ayuk in 2020. Trey Lance, as we all remember, was the third pick overall in 2021. And because of it, they didn't have a first-round pick in 22 or 23. And then their first-round pick in 24 was Ricky Pearsall at pick number 31. So as far as speculation about teams tonight, they're saying that the Jaguars are poised to explore a bold move. And they're the team worth watching tonight. So that's going to be something to look for. Do the Jaguars make a big move? The other big story out there is the Browns believe that they're shopping or believed to be shopping cornerback Greg Newsome and edge rusher Ogbo Okoronkwo. Okoronkwo had 7.5 sacks over the past 2 seasons. Newsome went to Northwestern, first-round pick. He's entering the final year of his deal. He's not coming off a very good year, but he was a really good player before this year. So going to be real interesting to see what the 49ers do. There's a lot of speculation that Mason Graham may fall to the 49ers. And yet there are people out there that really don't like Mason Graham. And if you said, what don't the people like about Mason Graham? Okay, here it is. He weighed 14 pounds lighter than he was allegedly supposed to be at the combine. So he played at 318, but he weighed in at 294. And so the walk-around weight and the playing weight are not in the same neighborhood, and that's a concern. He's got short arms, 32-inch arms. They measured him at the combine. Derek Harmon, for example, a lot of people like Derek Harmon. Derek Harmon's got 34 and 3/8-inch arms, almost 35-inch arms. Mason Graham, 32-inch arms. The analytics people are not going to be high on Mason Graham, and the Niners are looking to build a consensus. The only event he did at the combine was the bench, and he finished second to last. So there's a lot of concern about just his overall physical presence. This is not some gigantic, massive war daddy who's just going to dominate. Now, on the other hand, people have said, well, he only had, some guy sent me a thing, said he only had 6.5 sacks in college. Well, he actually had 9. And that is a half sack more than Chris Jones had at Mississippi State. Chris Jones is like the standard for the position. So I don't know that I'm going to point to his sack production at Michigan as a downside when the greatest defensive tackle in the game, in my opinion, is Jones, and he had fewer sacks than Mason Graham even had in the same number of years. So I don't know about that. He is pudgy with a bad body. That is a little bit of a concern. He's a former wrestler, though, and he plays with tremendous leverage. So there hasn't been a lot of visibility for him in the draft cycle, but that's not a concern to me. The film's all there. A lot of people say that it's an advantage that he played next to Kenneth Grant, but Kenneth Grant definitely is a good player, but I don't know when I watched that film if I saw, Mason Graham benefiting all day from Grant. I just didn't. I thought Grant probably benefited more from Graham, to be completely honest. And, personally, I do think that Graham's a little topped out. I would rather go with Walter Nolan. I'd rather go with Kenneth Grant. But I do understand the special traits that this kid has and, the plug and play possibilities here. And I think if he falls to them at 11, I think I would have a hard time passing on Mason Graham. I think I'd have a hard time passing. So that's kind of how I see it right now as far as, a couple hours before the draft. Now, as far as the mock drafts, they're all over the place. Daniel Jeremiah shook up the place yesterday by saying Gray Zabel to the Niners at 11. That to me seems like a major reach. I know a lot of people loved him at the Senior Bowl, but go watch the actual Senior Bowl if you have it on tape. He got owned in that game. He got absolutely owned in the game. Now, he was good in the practices, and he was one of the practice players of the week. Go watch the film of the game. I didn't think he played all that well, and I watched that a couple times. So, not the big Gray Zabel fan. To me, that seems kind of a low end. If you're going to go guard, give me a big power end guard like a Booker. I know people would say, well, Zabel's got movement ability and he fits the Niners scheme. Okay. All right. We're going to go North Dakota State FCS again, and you're going to do this with the 11th pick overall. Seems a little risky. And then the irony. I mean, if you tell me if you have a philosophy, then have a philosophy. But if you tell me last year your philosophy is that you don't take offensive linemen high because your philosophy is that you believe in skill position guys and building, in other areas of your football team, well, I'll take you at your word until the next year if you come back and go Gray Zabel in the first round. And then I'm like, well, what happened to the offensive line? You can get those guys later. You said you could get offensive linemen later. You proved it by drafting Dom Pooney in the third round. And now you're going to reach for Gray Zabel in the first round when you have a billion of other needs? That seems a little odd to me. It seems a little low end. But I would bet the analytics people love Gray Zabel. But and then by the way, we've been saying all year that Brendel's not very good at center, only to be told by everybody from Shanahan to Lynch to Chris Forrester that we're all wrong. That Brendel's not only is he not a liability, he's a strength. So if he's a strength, then you can't take Gray Zabel here. I don't, because I think Gray Zabel's a center. He played tackle. I think he's a center in the NFL, or maybe a tackle. But he's either a short arm tackle or a center. And either way, I just think that one would bug me. So that's what Daniel Jeremiah said yesterday. He says Gray Zabel at 11. And a lot of people think Dallas likes Gray Zabel a lot at 12. So if the Niners, want to take the Cowboys player one pick in front of them, they could probably do it. But to me, that would be a low end. That would be a very disappointing number one, in my opinion. Efficient, but not overpowering. And I don't think he would make you just a dominant offensive line. If I'm going to draft an interior offensive lineman in the top 12 picks, I want to have a real people mover like a Tyler Booker, more than a movement athlete like Zabel, who's more of a technician. I do like Zabel, but I don't like him here. I like Zabel in a trade back, but I don't like him at 11. Charles Davis says they're going to Shamar Stewart. Bucky Brooks says Walter Nolan. Eric Edholm from the NFL Network, Shamar Stewart. Chad Reuter, Will Johnson, the cornerback from Michigan. I think there's knee issues there. Mark Ross, NFL Network, Jihad Campbell. I wouldn't hate that. Jihad Campbell tested great, and he was very productive. Adam Ranks is Jalon Walker. Love Jalon Walker. Mike Band says Mikael Williams. Would not be happy with that one. Gennaro Felice says Derek Harmon. Rhett Lewis says Josh Simmons from Ohio State. MJD, Maurice Jones-Drew says Mason Graham. Chris Sims says Shamar Stewart. Dane Brugler said Shamar Stewart. Mel Kiper and Field Yates did a combo. Oh, that's so cute. They went with Kelvin Banks. Matt Mayoka says Shamar Stewart. Peter Schrager said Walter Nolan. Nick Wagner says Mikael Williams. Matt Barrow says Walter Nolan. Kyle Krabs from the 33rd team says Mason Graham. Josh Edwards from CBS Sportsline says Mikael Williams. Brian Diardo from CBS says Mike Green. Mark Stolter from the Draft Network says Walter Nolan. I'm saying Kenneth Grant, which I can see I'm the only one who's taking that. That would be, I would like a trade back. I would like a trade back in Kenneth Grant, but I'm just saying Kenneth Grant. The one thing I've got to show in this, the one little piece of data that I want to share that I think is compelling is Josh Norris. And I retweeted this. Steph Sanchez had this out. And I'm going to share the screen on this one. Well, first of all, I'm going to share the screen on this. This is pretty cool. If the Niners did take Mason Graham, here's what Mason Graham said to, Kay Adams. Here it is, little Mason Graham with Kay Adams. Let's see if we can throw this your guys' way.
What offensive lineman in the NFL can you not wait to take on?
I would just say Trent Williams. I want to see
so crazy.
like maybe like a base blocker. I want to have a run block against him, see what it really feels like. Everyone talks about it, so I want to see for myself.
Matthew, did you just hear that? He said Trent Williams. This man says he wants Trent Williams. People, what are we doing here? What?
She lost her mind on that. But yeah, so there you go. Maybe we could make that meeting. Maybe they could practice against each other every day. They wouldn't line up against each other. Trent Williams is obviously a tackle. This guy's not a tackle. But this is the video. This is the audio I want to share. This is from Steph Sanchez's Twitter. This is Josh Norris, who stopped by on a podcast and was talking about Shamar Stewart and Chris Kasarik. And I think this is really good stuff. And this, to me, this is pretty compelling. And this makes me think the Niners are going Shamar here in round one. Here it is, Josh Norris.
Of Shamar Stewart. Appreciates the traits.
Wait.
Chris Kasarik, their defensive line coach, through the grapevine, and now this can be hit or miss, but this is just what I've heard. A massive fan of Shamar Stewart. Appreciates the traits, appreciates the upside, thinks he can work with the tools that are there to turn him into a finisher. Heck, that might even be ahead of someone like Michael Williams. I know Walter Nolan's name has been mentioned by Albert Breer and others as a possibility here as an interior rusher. But Dago, I think I might be leaning so we can get a real shakeup. And I understand that people hate when mock drafts become unpredictable. I'm going to lean Shamar Stewart here to get.
So there you go. And he says, that Chris loves the traits and thinks he can coach this guy up. There's no question that Shamar Stewart has a lot of talent. The question is, can Chris get it out of him? And is he willing to stick his name out there and put his name to it? You know what I mean? That's the other thing. And I mean, it's one thing to say, I like the guy. It's another thing to say, yeah, I will put my professional credibility on the line and vouch that this is the guy we want. So, going to be interesting. Chris Kasarik, according to Josh Norris, he says Chris Kasarik is a huge fan of Shamar Stewart. That to me is probably the kicker. Right? If you said, who do I think it's going to be? This is what I'll give you the list. I got two lists here. I got the guys that I'd be really happy about, and then the guys I'd be like, oh man. So the guys I'd be really happy about, Mason Graham, if he fell. Yeah, I see there's athletic limitations, but go watch the film. This guy's totally dominating. If you like Kenneth Grant and you watch Michigan film, then you love this guy. In the Buckeyes game alone, he had like 7 tackles. He's super active, super mobile. He's just kind of a special movement defensive tackle. If he falls down to the Niners, I think that would be the gift. So that's one. 2, if Armand Membu falls to the Niners, I think that's a gift too. You plug him in at right tackle, you move McKivitz to left guard, and away you go. And you've got, a right tackle for the next 10 years. I love Membu. But, the only downside is he might not be a left tackle. He might just be your right tackle. He was a dominant right tackle at Missouri, and I love him. And if he falls to 11, you take him. I would take Stewart at 11. I got no problem with that. I watch Texas A&M football a lot. This guy plays the hardest. I mean, there's good motors, there's great motors, there's excellent motors, and then there's this guy's motor. So when you're this talented and you have this kind of motor, and like if Chris does like him, to me that would make sense. Why? Because you don't find guys as talented as Shamar Stewart who play as hard as Shamar Stewart. And if you say, well, Krug, how come he didn't have sacks? There's a lot. He played in the 4-eye. They didn't just play him off the edge at all times. They moved him around. They got rid of the football. Teams got rid of the football quick against A&M because they had 3 All-American defensive linemen. I just don't put tons of credence in that. If you have the traits, it's about traits. Daniil Hunter had 2.5 sacks his final year at LSU. He's had 99.5 in the NFL. So is it a factor? Sure. But to me, if you want to say he's not productive, there's guys who have been drafted on traits who weren't productive, but they didn't lead their team in the SEC in pressures. John Lynch was asked, what is he looking for in a defensive end? He said, I'm looking for a guy who can set the edge with physicality, close down that space in the run game, and pressure the quarterback off the edge. Shamar Stewart, man. That is Shamar Stewart. So that's what he said he wanted. We'll see if he drafts him on tonight in round 1. Walter Nolan. I'd be really happy with Walter Nolan. I think Walter Nolan's got athleticism. Walter Nolan's a bad A. He's a bad A. Now, he may be a pain in the A. I'll say that. And that's not my problem. That's Chris's issue. That's Salah's issue. That's Shanahan's issue. He may be a gigantic pain in the ass. But you know what? This guy can play. And he always could. He was a 5-star in high school. He was great at A&M. He's been greater at Ole Miss. And I think you can play him anywhere. I think he's an awesome 3 technique, but he's got great interior pass rush ability. But I think he's got enough body bend and looseness. And I think he's like a Chris Jones. I think you could play him a few downs on a defensive end if you wanted to. He's that special. I mean, 5-star. This was the number 1 guy in the portal when he went to transfer, and he wound up with Lane Kiffin at Ole Miss. Mason Graham, Shamar Stewart, Walter Nolan. Yes. Jalon Walker. Hell yes. I love Jalon Walker. Awesome player. Kenneth Grant, even if you had to take him at 11, I would say yes, because you're talking about a guy who commands double teams inside just because of his sheer force. And Chris makes a nice little salary to coach. Coach this guy up. This guy's 330 pounds and fast as hell. And, at times is dominant. So, yes, Kenneth Grant, I'd be happy with that. I'd be happy with Tyler Booker. Why? Because I think he's a road grading guard who's going to be a Pro Bowler for years. I'm good with, the 2 undersized but long-armed edge rushers who are productive. I like Mike Green and I like Ezeraku. I watched Boston College. That guy single-handedly won games by himself. Guy's amazing. 17.5 sacks, super long arms, crazy motor. Ezeraku's a blue chipper who can hunt quarterbacks and sack the quarterback. There's no doubt about that. He is really good. And Mike Green is probably the best when you're looking for moves, and he can play the run, and he's got a motor, and he's an athlete. I mean, if he checks out off the field with his whatever issues he's had, away from football, he'd be near the top of my list, man. Mike Green and Ezeraku are productive as hell off the edge. I'll take them. Absolutely. Love those guys. Okay. Who am I afraid of? I'm afraid of Mykel Williams. Why? Because he played in the rotation at Georgia. He didn't play tons of snaps. He was a 5-star guy who looked great early and then kind of coasted. He really coasted this year. And then, I thought he looked like the way inferior player next to Jalon Walker in their dual workout last week. I know a lot of people love Mykel, but he can set the edge in the run game, but I just see good. I think he's got a really high floor, but a really low ceiling. I don't think I never saw that at Georgia. And since the Niners have Robert Beal, and Robert Beal is 6'4", 260 and runs sub 4.5 and really hasn't done anything, I would try to steer clear of Kirby Smart's recommendations on every single 5-star that rolled through Athens. All right. Let's just pump the brakes on some Kirby and be a little bit more circumspect. He likes his dudes. But I'd rather take that kid Brinson in day 3 than spend a 1st-round pick on Mykel Williams. Especially when I watch Georgia, and I watched him every week. Tons of Malachi Starks, tons of Jalon Walker. And hardly ever do I remember Mykel Williams being talked about as an impact player on that Georgia front. There are busts that come out of USC, LSU, Alabama, guys who were thought to be great, and they had the tag and they just weren't awesome. So I'm not a big Mykel Williams fan. I think 11 would be a reach to take Gray Zabel. I don't want to see that. I don't want to see a center taken in. If you're going to take a center, you should have taken the guy last year, Frazier, who went to Pittsburgh, who was way tougher, meaner, and nastier. Not a huge Kelvin Banks guy. The Dane Brugler line from a scout who saw him said that they described him as a guy who loses slowly. That's not good. You don't want that. Will Johnson, I don't like because of the injury concerns and the lack of a big number of games. And Derek Harmon makes me nervous because his numbers against the run are not great. So if you could stay away from Mikael Williams, Gray Zabel, Kelvin Banks, Will Johnson, and Derek Harmon, I'd do me that favor, John. Stay away from those guys and go with either Graham, Shamar Stewart, Walter Nolan, Jalen Walker, Armand Membu, Kenneth Grant, Tyler Booker, Jadai Barron. I'm fine with him as well. Mike Green, Ezeraku, literally fine with any of those guys. All right, that's going to do it for the update video. When the Niners make their pick, we will go live on the Krug Show, the Pig and a Pickle Krug Show. Kev will be along for that. After the draft round 1 is over, join me on KMBR. I'll host a 2-hour post-draft call-in extravaganza on the radio tonight after the draft, probably between 9 and 11. So check that out. Thanks to Pig and a Pickle for being the title sponsor of the Krug Show. Thanks to Claw Daddy Arcades and Learn Key Upskill Academy. The links are in the description for all of the sponsors. And thanks to all of you guys for supporting the Krug Show on YouTube,